think about voting. Think about your experience. Primaries, general election, electoral college, winners voted by plurality. How many of you, raise your hands, believe that we have a successful form of voting, that our voting system works? Raise your hands. Okay, we've got a few people who do. We've got a number of people who don't. You're in the right place then for this conversation. I think that everyone here will learn a lot, because one of the things that we know is that the way we vote not only determines who's going to win, it shapes so much. The way campaigns are run, the way people feel about who's won the election, the way people feel about their agency and their trust in government. And we'll be discussing all of those things. The other thing that I want to mention, and we'll talk about a little bit more with Mark today, is that there's a launch of a new nonprofit organization called Better Choices for Democracy. It's a nonprofit that is dedicated to making our elections work better, to restoring trust in our election system. So you'll have an opportunity to hear about that too. At this point, I want to introduce those who are sitting on stage with me. So seated immediately to my left is Dr. Eric Maskin. And Dr. Maskin won the Nobel Prize in 2007, which, exactly, an extraordinary accomplishment. He is the Adams University professor and professor of mathematics at Harvard University. Next to him is seated Senator Joe Manchin. Senator Manchin, when I think about your career, I think about the fact that you've basically run the table on public service. You were in the West Virginia House, Senate, Secretary of State, Governor, and Senator. U.S. Senator. That's a lot. That's a lot. A real career of public service. Thank you for that. And then seated next to him is Mark Strama, who is a board member, as I said, of Better Choices for Democracy. He's the director of the Annette Strauss Institute here at the University of Texas, where he's also a professor of practice, and he has a long career working to, again, rebuild and to establish trust in our electoral system. So with that, please join me in thanking these men for joining us. So we're going to spend about 45 minutes having a conversation up here and then save time for you all to ask questions as well. So please think of your questions and we'll turn to you soon. I want to start out, and we all agreed backstage, in case so you all don't raise your eyebrows, we all agreed backstage, we're on a first name basis up here. So Joe, I want to start with a question to you. And again, as I said, you've had an extraordinary career in public service, which also means you spent time on the campaign trail as well as time in office after campaigns. You know deeply that right now Americans don't feel that our government, that our electoral system is working for them. There's a lack of a sense of trust, a lack of a sense of agency. The list goes on, and the polarization that we're all witnessing. I'm wondering if you can talk to us about what you see as being one of the greatest flaw that we need to try and address in our electoral system.
Yes, first of all, thank you all for having me and allowing me to be here with you, and my wife Gail's with me, and we just enjoy being in Texas, and we have a daughter that lives in Houston, so got to visit her for a little bit. Let me just say, the first question you asked was, how many of you raise your hand with the system we have of electing officials do you agree with? And very few raise your hand. I would think most of us were in the system that, I just don't know. Is there something better? So we'd put in don't know, because what we have is still better than most, but we don't know if there's something could be better. So what you're really telling me, come on, give us something better. Okay. And I think we have something better. The more people you can get involved in the process, the primary process in my state, I'm now part of the total majority of people in America that have registered to participate in the political process. I'm a part of a party called No Party Affiliation, which is an independent. So with that, there's 43% of us in America. There's only 28% are Democrat, 28% Republican, give or take. Okay, we're the majority. The last election, 2024, the only thing you heard about was 7 battleground states. 43 were predetermined. How come? Now all you're seeing is a fight in Texas and everywhere else. Let's just redistrict everything and make it better. We'll make it more lopsided, okay? And we'll take advantage of the system. Everything that you're seeing happening is why you just didn't know. Is there something better? Well, I can tell you, it's hard to believe this. I think California does it as well as anybody, if not better. They have open primaries, and you have to have 51% to win. So a representative form of democracy is who we are. I can't even participate in the primaries in West Virginia. I can't go and vote if I see a real good Republican or a real good Democrat. They close the primaries. There's 13, we're closed off completely. There's a total of 44. There's either one side or the other's closed. There's not that many open processes in America, and they're trying to close them down. Perfect example, dear friend of mine, Bill Cassidy, Republican senator from Louisiana, okay? They used to have open primaries. Guess what? He's not Republican enough. He's not MAGA enough. So by golly, we're going to change the Republican primary to where it has to be closed so we can beat Bill. That's what we're dealing with in America today. And so yes, is there something better? I think you're going to hear about something better. And if we can all get with that, because I can tell you, if it wasn't for crossovers, I would have never gotten elected in anything. I've never been extreme left or extreme right. And I don't think that way because you can't fix anything. I've never passed a piece of legislation or never voted for a piece that came from the extreme left or right. And I've been involved for 43 years. Not one piece of legislation that I ever voted and ever passed. Nobody from the extremes ever passed a piece of legislation. Think about that. You don't run your life from the extremes. Businesses don't run from the extremes. Nobody runs from the extremes. Now, I use the extremes as my conscience that I forget something, that I leave somebody behind. And then I use the extremes from the far right. Or you make me pay for something I don't want. Why are you making me pay? You follow me? There's a balance to be had. And that's what we're looking for. And that's why that's why we introduced the Nobel Laureate. We introduced the smartest guy here first for that reason. But I can just tell you, I'm concerned and I'm frustrated with the system. And I think we can do much better. And I'm just so appreciative that I'm here with Mark and Eric, and we're going to see if we can give you some ideas of how to fix it.
Perfect answer and segue to going to Eric. I mean, Joe has said, I don't know, people don't know. Is there something better out there? And Eric, I want to turn to you. Years, decades of extensive research. Based on that, I want you to talk to us about what might be better. And I'm going to ask if we can put a slide up that will give you all in the audience a visual as, Eric, you talk to us about what principles should guide us toward the something better, and how would we execute on that? What would that look like?
So I think the number one principle that a good voting rule should satisfy is that the candidate who gets elected is actually supported by a majority of people versus the other candidates. Our current system, or the system that predominates in this country, is called plurality rule, or first past the post. And if there are more than two candidates, it definitely does not elect the majority preference winner. And to see that, look at, well, first of all, imagine that there are three candidates for election, blue, purple, and red. And up at the top of the slide, you'll see that there are three groups of voters. There are the blue voters, who rank blue first, and then purple, and then red. There are the purple voters, with the ranking purple, red, blue. And then there are the red voters, red, purple, blue. Now, under plurality rule, the standard voting system in the United States, who wins? Well, it's going to be blue, because 40% support blue, 22% support purple, 38% support red. So blue is the plurality choice. However, a majority of voters prefer each of the other candidates to blue. If you add up the red support, it comes to 60% against blue. And if you add up the purple support, it also comes to 60% against blue. So there's something very wrong about electing blue when either of the other two candidates is actually more popular. Now, many of you will have heard of ranked choice voting or instant runoff voting, which is used in 2 states now. It's used in Maine and it's used in Alaska. It's also used in many American cities. It is definitely an improvement on plurality rule, and we see that if we run a instant runoff vote with the numbers that we have up there, oh, it's the old numbers, I'm sorry. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I was giving you,
You made a last minute change.
okay. So I hope you didn't get confused by my recounting of the plurality rule. So it's actually even more extreme that and blue is in a minority, is still in a minority, but an even bigger minority. So for instant runoff voting, notice that no candidate gets a majority of the first place votes. So what we do under instant runoff voting is we drop the candidate who has the fewest first place votes. That's purple. And we move red into first place for the middle voters, the purple supporters, now that purple has been eliminated. Well, then red beats blue in the instant runoff, and red is elected. That's better than plurality rule, of course, because at least red is preferred by a majority against blue. But red is not preferred by a majority against purple. A majority of voters prefer purple to red. And that's where our proposal, which is called consensus choice sometimes. In fact, I think that's the official name that our group has adopted, sometimes just called majority rule, true majority rule. If you look at those same numbers and you look at head-to-head comparisons, notice that purple beats red.
Over. Yeah.
In the
Yes.
first column, 44% prefer purple to red. In the second column, 15% prefer purple to red. So that's 59%. And purple also beats blue. The second column and the third column add up to 56%. So purple is the true majority winner. And if your goal in designing an election is to ensure that the candidate elected is actually supported by a majority against every other candidate, that is the way to go. Purple should win, and consensus choice, which elects the candidate who beats each other candidate in a pairwise comparison, is the way to do it.
So I think this visual helps us understand we've got the plurality, doesn't actually get us to the person that is favored by the largest number of people. We've got instant runoff, which takes the person that gets the lowest number of votes off the table, but it still doesn't give us, it's better, as you said, but it doesn't get us to the actual answer. In head-to-head, you're comparing each candidate to the other to find out ultimately the candidate that the greatest number of people actually want. And Mark, I'm wondering if I can come to you, given that explanation, if you can talk to us, given your political experience and background, what's the benefit if we're looking at this head-to-head comparison approach, the consensus choice vote?
I can try to explain that. I know that this seems complicated, but it's really not. It is an axiomatic principle of elections. And by the way, when you asked how many people support the way we do elections, you said how many people support voting. And I saw a lot of hands raised who believe our voting systems can be trusted, that we can trust what election officials tell us was the official tally of the votes at the end of an election. I put myself in that category. I know they do too. What you were really getting at was, do you think we're doing a good job of selecting elected officials who represent the majority of the voters in this country? And I don't think any of you would probably answer yes to that question, because we use a system now. I'll give you an example in Texas. A typical Texas House district has 200,000 people in it, about 150,000 eligible voters. About 148 out of the 150 districts are gerrymandered, so that the only election that matters is the primary. In the average Texas House primary, out of those 150,000 eligible voters, there are about 10,000 voters. And you only have to win half of them. So you can get elected to the Texas House with about 5,000 votes to represent 150,000 voters, 200,000 Texans. That is not democracy. That is the problem we're trying to solve. The way we conduct elections is subject to rules that were created by people. You ask, what makes a great political athlete? It depends on the rules. What makes a great athlete? If I asked you what's the prototype of an athlete, if the sport is gymnastics, it's somebody not too sizable, super strong, great agility. If the sport is basketball, the same athlete that's good at gymnastics might not be great at basketball because it is subject to different rules. How we structure the rules of elections determines the type of political athlete that we will have represent us in government. The rules we have now, where only 5,000 out of 150,000 voters determine who wins an election in a gerrymandered district in a primary, do not give us political athletes that represent most of us. The consensus choice model, where you pair each candidate head-to-head, now I will answer your question very specifically. It is an axiomatic rule of elections that voters should be able to express their preferences sincerely, and candidates should be able to run sincerely without accidentally causing the opposite effect of their intention. Take the 2000 presidential election. There were people on the far left who voted for Ralph Nader. Their second choice was Al Gore, but their vote for Nader helped George Bush. There were people on the far right who voted for Pat Buchanan. Their second choice was George Bush. Their vote for Buchanan helped Al Gore. That is a perverse outcome. The way you cancel that effect, that's what's called the spoiler effect in election reform, is by pairing each candidate head-to-head, using the rankings on the ballots to know who each voter prefers in a head-to-head election. And when you do that, there is a winner who defeats all the other candidates head-to-head, who gets 50% of the vote against each other candidate. In Eric's example up there, the purple candidate will always get the red votes against the blue candidate. And the purple candidate will always get the blue votes against the red candidate. And that candidate, therefore the purple candidate, will always end up with a majority in a round-robin election. That's the principle that governs the proposal for consensus choice. It's a pretty simple modification of the instant runoff voting ranked choice that they use in Alaska, and it's important because they came within 0.2% of repealing ranked choice voting in Alaska last year, and ranked choice voting failed on 6 other statewide ballots last year because that system's flaws have caused a political backlash against it that is putting the whole reform at risk.
Let me give you my 2 cents from the political standpoint, being in the middle myself and trying to attract people to get involved. So many of you all will be wonderful candidates. You'd be wonderful public servants. You might be thinking, I don't have the political support. I don't have the financial support. I don't know if I could really compete. You really can't. You really can't compete in today's political system. The primaries are controlled. If you're not a good enough Republican, I'm going to primary you. If you're not a good enough Democrat, I'm going to primary you. If I have control of the primary in the states where you come from, I can do that. If I have an open primary system or a ranked choice, and what we're giving you is a ranked choice 02. This is the second version. The first version was more confusing. This one basically is going to identify how you can become involved and also be really active in your own process. How many of us have known someone that in this room that you would say, I'm going to basically select you to run because you should be in public service. I know where your heart is. I know where your soul is. I know your giving, and I know your financial responsibilities. I know you're a good, solid citizen. I want you to represent me. Our founding fathers said, listen, everyone wasn't chosen. I mean, they didn't get elected. They were trying to find the best people in their communities at that time to serve. I can't recruit anybody to serve hardly anymore because of the system. And that's the problem. We've got to change it. You get a good person. I said, let me tell you, you might not win the first time out, but I'll guarantee you, a good person, man or woman, is going to be elevated. They came from nothing. They had no really active support. They didn't have anybody with a lot of money behind them. They just were solid citizens with great ideas for public service. And that person can be elevated. They might not win the first time. They get a taste of it, and they say, I can make a difference now. And they'll get a following. That's what we're not doing. We're not breeding another good bench, if you will, a bench of candidates that should be involved.
Joe,
that's the problem, Ellen.
I just want to continue on this point that you're making and thinking about how you grow the bench, how do you get people engaged. I am from Virginia. I live in Virginia. We just went through campaign there. Think about New Jersey, other places I know there's election here. And I'm thinking about the ads, and I'm thinking about the way the campaigning worked. Do you think that in addition to building the bench, that this potentially also changes the way that people campaign? Because I know people are watching these ads, they're listening to what's going on, and they're tuning out in many regards right there and then.
Well, if I'm playing just I'm throwing raw meat to the extreme, on left or right, I don't have to really worry about it because I know the primary, as Mark had said, the primary is going to be such a low turnout. You can control low turnout. A politician dreams of a low turnout. Okay? They can control a low turnout.
Right. What a
They're
perverse
overpowering with their ground forces, and if they have the money to organize, they can do all of that. They have no idea when the turnout is greater than they ever anticipated. That's when fear comes into a politician's mind. Oh my God, I never even looked at that sector of society. I didn't even poll them. I don't know what they're thinking. We don't know how to contact them. And then everything changes. It's just unbelievable. And it's so highly tuned and regulated. Think about this, 160 million of us voted in the last election, 2024. Do you know how many of us voted in the Democrat primary across the country and the Republican primary for president? About 11 to 12 million each. 24 million made this selection that 160 million of us had to vote for. One of the two. That's it.
You'll appreciate this because you've had so many roles in government.
A hard time keeping the job.
When a Speaker of the House is elected in Texas, they campaign and they go and ask people for support, and a lot of them have said, I'd love to support you, but I'm already committed to my closest friend.
True.
And what do you say then to them? Can I have your second?
You always want the second, and then you go talk to the first to drop out so you have his votes.
That's right. So you know what you don't do? You don't say, don't vote for that guy, he's a son of a bitch. You don't practice divisive politics. The current system rewards divisive politics because it pits the extremes against each other. And you appeal to your extreme, to your tribe, by vilifying the other extreme. In a consensus choice election, you would never vilify any segment of the electorate in the same way you wouldn't in a campaign for Speaker of the House, because you wouldn't mind being their second choice. So it would reduce the toxicity of campaigns. It would heal some of the divisiveness that we've experienced as we've become so polarized into a system where the primaries determine everything.
Right, you're always in the hunt. Eric, you look like you wanted to jump in there.
Well, just to go back to the example on the screen, if you're running Purple's campaign, the only way Purple is going to get elected is by having a lot of red voters put Purple second, and by having a lot of blue voters putting Purple second. Purple's campaign is not going to alienate those voters. It's going to try to appeal to those voters, and that helps end the curse of negative campaigning.
What he's talking about is in hardcore politics, we know you're going to give money to us one way or another. Money's not, politicians don't fear money anymore. They fear not getting your vote. That's what they fear. And if someone else in this system here can attract your vote, they're voting for me because they think I'm going to win. But maybe if I don't win, I really want that person. That's really the best person. So I want that other person. So now I have a choice. I have a chance to show you I had a choice. Now I didn't think they were going to win, but if this person would win, that's the person I want. Under the system you have today in America, that person is never going to enter, never going to get involved, never going to win. But I want to tell you, you want to shake up the system? You want to shake up the system of duopoly, two major corporations called a Democrat corporation and a Republican corporation, from rigging basically how they control the system? This is how you do it. This is the only way you do it. And that's why I thank both Eric and Mark trying to put it and looking at any flaws that people might have used for attacking it. I've always said this, Lisa Murkowski would not have won. She could not win in the Republican primary. She's one of the better senators we've ever had to work with across the aisle. But they would have gotten her. The Republican Party, she's not Republican enough. Susan Collins, they're coming after Susan. They're going after Cassidy. MAGA has such a strong tie on their party that they can primary you, and one word from the president can maybe knock you out of contention. So that's what we're concerned about. I just want the best person. If that's the best person and the president wants to support him, great. If not, I want to have a chance to put the best person in.
Eric, I want you to jump in, and I also have a follow-up question because we've been talking about the incentives around campaigning. I'm curious what this might mean for incentives once a person's in office, but I want you to jump in.
Sure. I wanted to make an additional point about this kind of example. So in my view, the greatest political problem our country faces is polarization at the moment. The two main parties are so far apart, they cannot compromise anymore. And worse than that, each side literally hates the other side. Now, how do we cure that? Well, one way is by encouraging people in between the two to run for office, encouraging Joe Manchin, say, to run for president as a compromise between the two extremes. Well, Joe Manchin cannot get elected under the current system. Why? Because all the Democrats will vote for the Democrat, all the Republicans will vote for the Republican. They all vastly prefer Joe to the other side, but they don't have the opportunity to express that view. So simply to end political polarization and move to consensus choice, where you do get to name your second choice and where the second choice really matters in determining the outcome, that's a recipe for first being able to elect centrist candidates like Joe Manchin, and once you can do that, well then the two big parties have every incentive to move back to the center because they want to get their candidates elected too, and consensus choice is a force for electing centrists.
Mark, do you look like you?
I do want to say something about that. So I think you were starting to get to the question of how might it change the behavior of elected officials once elected.
Right.
And a second order question is, after it's baked for a while, how might it change the behavior of the candidates who currently occupy the extremes? So let me acknowledge that y'all came here expecting Charles Munger Jr. to be in this seat, and you ended up with me because he wasn't able to make it. He sends his regrets. I'm neither a billionaire nor an astrophysicist nor a Republican, so I'm not Charles Munger Jr., but I am a big fan. I was a junior member of the minority party in the lower house of the state legislature, but I spent some time in politics. And I can tell you, and I represented a swing district. In fact, it was a more red than blue district. And I was therefore constantly looking for ways to build bridges to the Republicans that I represented. It was the only way I could hold my office. I know you did so in an even more stark example than I did. Consensus choice provides that incentive to all elected officials. And I would even say, because Eric, you're a game theorist and a Nobel Prize winner, when you said the purple vote, the purple candidate will appeal to both sides, eventually if the rules require it, so will the blue and red candidates. And we will stop running campaigns about who to hate more and instead run campaigns across the board about ideas. And that is where we need to go.
Let me say, if I may, Melody, say one thing. These are the smart ones. I'm just going to give you what how the ground rules are right now and why it's not working. I think if you're going to start a conversation of saying the system, all of you, I'd say we're probably I'm not sure. I don't really like what we've got, but I don't know what else you got better. Start the conversation. Do you think someone that we're electing in this wonderful experiment called a representative form of democracy, should a person have to have at least a simple majority of 51% in order to serve me? So they're serving the majority. That's the best way to start the conversation. Because in most of your states and most of our states in America, a lot of the people serving as your governor, as any statewide office, are probably doing it with 39, 44, 42, 45, 46%. They don't have 51 anymore because we're so divided. If you change that one thing, simple majority, okay, should have to have before you can serve, because you're not representing the majority of the people. Because I'll give you an example. In my state, governor got elected with 35%. That means 65% feel like that. I don't know if that was my choice, but I got to live with it now. That's the way to start it, and then I'll guarantee then you can transcend into something, what we're talking. We're going to try to simplify this a little bit more so it makes sense if there's 4, because it drops out. If you get 10 people running for a primary, where does it drop out? You might want to explain that when you get more than 3 or 4.
So
We went right to the smartest person real quick.
No offense taken.
Alaska, I think Alaska has been moving in the right direction. What Alaska has now is an open primary. So we no longer have a Democratic, we no longer have a Republican primary in Alaska. Anybody can run.
California too.
California too, but Alaska does things better, because in California, there are only 2 candidates who go to the general election. That's not dreadful. It's certainly better than the old party primary system. But in Alaska, you get up to 4 candidates.
Maximum 4.
Maximum.
Everybody
4.
else drops out.
That's right. And then you use ranked choice voting, which gives the voters real choice. If you limit it to 2, well, you might have a MAGA Republican and you might have a socialist Democrat in the election. That doesn't give voters enough choice. With 3 or more candidates, you're probably going to have a centrist in there too, and that's where the logic that we've been trying to explain today comes in.
Well, and Eric, to pick up on this point, because we've been talking a lot about the candidates, the incentives for the candidates, how the candidates might vote, but when we get to the voters and the sense of how do I have agency in this? Why do I believe in my government? I mean, 1964 was a high watermark for when people believed that their government was working for them. And it's been a roller coaster, but it hasn't hit that point, and that was 61 years ago. I know that because I was born in 1964. And so when you think about the voters, and right now, something like 80% of voters don't believe that their elected representatives care about people like them. That 47%, I think it was a recent Marist poll, 47% of voters think that the person that they have elected, has been elected, doesn't care about the issues that matter to them. So when we get to ultimately people feeling that they are represented, that the election has been fair, that they've had an opportunity to engage, it seems as though this might give people a chance to feel like they really have a stake in the game when it comes to their democracy and elected officials. Is that the outcome that we think this might precipitate?
Absolutely. I mean, to begin with, under the current system, a voter votes for one candidate. And if that candidate happens to win, fine. But if there are multiple candidates in the race, there's a good chance that someone else is going to get elected, in which case the voter voting for that one losing candidate is going to feel alienated, understandably. Under a ranking system, voters get to express themselves more fully. And sure, they might not get their first choice, but they're pretty likely to get one of their top choices. And so the whoever is elected is probably reflecting that voter's views more fully than in our current polarized world.
Yeah. Mark?
Joe will not say this, so I will. If you ask the people of West Virginia, does Joe Manchin care about you? Because I love the way you framed it. So many voters say politicians don't care about me. If you ask the people of West Virginia, does Joe Manchin care about you? Vast majority would say yes, and it wouldn't be different among different Democrats and Republicans, even though for most of the time he was their senator, he was a Democrat. I would like to think that that would be true of the people I represented too on a much smaller scale, because I had to. I couldn't get elected, but I was in one of only 2 or 3 districts in Texas that was genuinely competitive in the general election. Having politicians accountable to every voter is how you get voters to feel that politicians care about them. And right now, the rules do not make them accountable to every voter. They do the exact opposite.
Let me just say this, I will now talk about my 2018 election for Senate, re-election in 2018. In 2016, Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton by 40 points, 40. My whole state has flipped. My whole state has flipped from being over a majority of 75% registered Democrats to 80% registered Republicans now. The whole state. Minnie Mouse running with an R on her name should have beat me. And I mean that because of its politics identity. The only thing that saved me was I'd been involved for so long and I'd never been identified as a hardcore politician. That's Joe the Democrat. They never thought of me that way. I never acted that way. I never saw a Republican wasn't my friend. And they might have had a different idea, and I never saw Democrats had all the answers. I needed help on the other side. That's the way I always looked at it. That's the only thing that carried me through. If it wasn't for that, and the brand I had basically been all my life, I wouldn't have had a chance. Now, I'm choosing that. We're going in areas now that are leaning one way pretty hard or the other way. How does a person that feels like that ever get a chance? They can't, because they never had that much experience. I had 30 years behind me. They could say, well, he's never voted like that. He wasn't that crazy. He wasn't too far to the left or right. But a person trying to get involved, we can't get them involved now unless the system anoints them, taps them, finances them, and says, you're mine. That's it. So we've got to change it, gang. And it's either going to change or we're all going to be truly hurting very, very badly if we don't, because it's going to get worse.
Yeah, this goes back to your point about how do we recruit the bench, and that's a very important and serious question. It goes to the depth and strength of those who are representing us in a constitutional republic. I mean, it is the most important set of decisions that, among them, that we can make as citizens, and getting the right people, those who are committed, those who want to be engaged, to participate is essential to that.
Thomas Jefferson said one time, he says, when the people fear their government, that's tyranny. When the government fears their people, that's liberty. So think of where we are, gang. Think of where we're going.
Well, I'm going to open the floor for questions in just 1 minute. So start thinking of your questions and prepare to line up. Mark, I do want to ask you a final question. Given your experience, and it's that, Rock the Vote, all the work, the Annette Strauss Institute, I'm curious how you think those in the audience, I work at a university, other nonprofits, how can we engage to help move the system in this direction?
That's a great question. Boy, when you started the question to me, I thought everybody got up to leave, but they all got up to ask questions. Holy cow. I'll keep this short. But look, it's the right question, because here's the thing. In the 5 terms I served in the House, I proposed campaign finance reform and independent redistricting commissions every session. It never got a hearing. The incumbent politicians are the only people who benefit from the system, from the rules as they are, and they're the last people to change it. So, sorry to disappoint the Texans in the room. I doubt we'll be in the vanguard of this reform. But there are several states in the country that have initiative and referendum, and those are the states that are going to lead the path on this. The theory of change here is that 6 states tried to adopt ranked choice voting using the old tabulation method called instant runoff voting. And it failed in every state because Republicans have decided that instant runoff voting is some kind of democratic voodoo. They believe that because it elected Mary Peltola in Alaska in a congressional race after they had just adopted ranked choice voting. And the Republicans in Alaska thought this must be witchcraft, because we are a 58% Republican state, and the first election with ranked choice voting, we get a Democratic member of Congress. And the truth is, they've got a point. The mathematical flaw, the mathematical difference that Dr. Maskin just showed us is what happened there. And it's a threat to Senator Murkowski too. That if Democrats all vote for the Democrat and Republicans all vote for the most Republican candidate in the race, the centrist won't win. And that's what happened in that Alaska special election. But in that same election last year where 6 states rejected ranked choice voting, there was also a ballot initiative to repeal ranked choice voting in Alaska. And ranked choice voting hung on 50.1 to 49.9, which is not much of a victory. And everybody in Alaska knows that they are in a precarious stalemate. This solution, Dr. Maskin's solution that he showed us, has the potential to bring the left and right together in Alaska. If we can prove it there and have the Alaska Republicans telling the rest of the Republicans around the country, we fixed ranked choice voting. We fixed what was wrong with it. And it's not democratic voodoo. Then there is a chance for reform. Let's get to the question.
Great. So this is what we want to do on questions. As you can see, this is fantastic. We've got a number of people. We've got a front mic and a back mic. We'll toggle back and forth between the two. And remember, ask a question, not a quatement, which is a statement that sounds like a question, but actually ask a question, and then our panelists will respond. We'll take the first person at the front mic, please.
Thank you for taking questions. My name is Mohammed. I'm from Dallas. My question is about the Electoral College. Looking back on the 2016 elections, Hillary Clinton had the popular vote in the election. However, she lost to the Electoral College with Trump having more electoral votes. And that was partially because some states flipped, like the electors. But my question to you is, and this has been a conversation recently about abolishing the Electoral College, do you think there's a benefit to abolishing it, or do you think it prevents the interests of minorities?
If you abolish the Electoral College, you only have a few states that'll make all the decisions, which you can say 10 states make them now anyway, okay? Electoral College is supposed to give us even. No different than how the Senate was designed to have 2 members of every state. 13 original colonies. Can you imagine what Massachusetts and New York thought at that time? You're letting them two little dinky states have the same veto power over me. So the bottom line is to get the participation and not just concentrate it in one area.
Okay, thank you.
Great. The person in the back mic.
Hello, thank you very much. My name is Mark. I really appreciate this discussion, especially about consensus choice voting and this idea. My question is the following. If we go historically and we take a look at the primary system was originally designed as a reform because the party system had been captured by party bosses and so forth. So my question is this, has there been thought about the way in which this new proposal would avoid the capture problem, or is it actually susceptible in the long term to being captured by the political elite or the powerful? Thank you.
Great, thank you.
I would say that it's not so susceptible to being captured by the political elite because don't forget in our example with purple, red, and blue, purple can be a complete outsider. Purple can be an independent, a member of no political party, and still have a fighting chance to win. All that purple has to do is position himself in a way that will attract both blue and red voters in the second position. So one strength of consensus choice is that it's anti-elite. It really allows for more independence in our political candidates.
I would just add, it's a great question. I would argue what we're proposing is the next evolution after the reform that got rid of the party bosses. This eliminates open primaries. The open primaries feature of consensus choice eliminates the gatekeepers altogether, lets anybody who wants to run without mucking it up for the other candidates, lets voters vote for whoever they prefer sincerely without inadvertently adversely affecting their own interests.
Great, thank you. Front mic.
Hi, I'm Shannon Dicely. I'm here from Lone Star College down in Harris County. My question is about a recent election we've had here in Texas, which was the constitutional election. We passed all 17 amendments with what's going to, I don't know if the official numbers have been in, last I checked, it was 15 to 16% of registered voters that selected that. 4 years before that, it was 14%, and both of these are actually high numbers for constitutional amendment elections. And I'm just wondering, is there any way to take what we've talked about today with candidates and make it so that we're not changing our constitution permanently without saying a majority of actual voters instead of a majority of voters who showed up made this decision?
So as the Texan on the panel, I'll tell you this. We amend our constitution if we need to make a left turn instead of a right turn. I mean, the problem you're really identifying is that our constitution is overly specific, not in the spirit of what constitution, the broad sweeping principles of governance that constitutions are intended for. It would probably be better if our constitutional elections were on the November of an even year ballot so that more voters participate. But to be honest with you, the fundamental problem you're identifying is that we're overly prescriptive in the Constitution of the state of Texas.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Great. The back mic.
The back.
The second mic in the back room.
I have a question for all three panelists. We've talked a lot about a purple candidate, and I'd like each of you to define what you think a purple candidate actually represents and what they would stand for.
The purple candidate?
Yes.
That means you're not always right and you're not always wrong.
Or left.
No, the bottom line is, are you willing to reach across the aisle? If you're looking at it right now, the whole political process has been weaponized. What team are you on? What tribe do you belong to? You belong to a Republican tribe or Democrat tribe? And if you do, it's used to be guilt by association. If we saw you talking to someone else, now it's guilt by conversation. You can't even talk to find out what you disagree or agree on, or you're accused. That's just gotten so bad, so horribly bad. And I'll tell you this, do you know in the United States Senate, there's only one time in the whole year that 100 of us sat down to get together at lunch. One time. It used to be every week. back in the late 90s and early 2000. Now it's gotten so divided. Caucuses have the Democrat, caucuses have the Republican, and no one ever crosses over. It is horrible, and it's not going to change behavior because they're getting more entrenched in that. So the purple candidate, it's not a crowded field, I can assure you of that. And we can all fit in a phone booth, and we have room to make a phone call. So it's something that needs to be done. This is why I'm so attracted to this. There's no place, no one's giving anybody in the middle cover. You get there, you think you're a moderate, you think you're purple, you think you can go work with both sides. There's no support. You got to go left or right, or they think you do.
Joe just put it perfectly. I don't think we can improve on that answer.
I don't think I can improve on it, but I do want to say this. We simplify this discussion by using red, blue, purple. In a world where we're no longer pitted against each other politically, it becomes less easy to put people on that spectrum because they're debating ideas, not division. And so I don't want people to think that while I think this puts the ballast in the political system closer to the median voter, the median voter is all over the map on issues. And so it doesn't mean that new ideas won't be welcome. They'll be more welcome than in a polarized system where we are reflexive about what tribe we're in rather than really considering people's ideas.
Yeah, and I'll say two things as these examples were being developed. You know, there was one example we had, it was like Bob, Mary, Carol. So there's just a diversity of potential candidates. And I will also say, having worked as a Senate staffer, for someone who would be identified not as a centrist, but someone who worked very, very hard and built a lot of coalition, did a lot of coalition building across the aisle, that finding that person that appealed to a broad number of voters, as Mark said, could look different in lots of different places. We'll take the front mic, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Chloe. I do consider myself a Democrat, and I just want to maybe push back respectfully on something that was said earlier, that this is the only way to improve engagement in primaries. I do think that there are multiple ways that we can go about that. For the first time in a long time in New York history, over 1 million people voted in the Democratic primary. And regardless of who you wanted to win that race, I think that one of the things that made engagement so high is that we saw multiple candidates be proud to be a Democrat and eschew what they thought the Democratic Party was about. So I guess my question for you is, do you truly believe that this is the only way that we can improve engagement in primaries?
Eric, you look like you're about to respond.
No, it's not the only way, but I think it's an effective way. And the open primary. So New York is a special case because New York is basically a Democratic town, and you're not going to get the same sort of diversity in candidates that you would expect at the state level. So when we talk about open primaries, we are directing our arguments to states, not cities. Cities can do it differently.
I think this is just saying in a nutshell, this would be good for the system across the country. It's not going to change the outcome in New York, I don't think. The outcome would have been the same with ranked choice, probably. The thing of it now is, the only thing I can tell every one of you all, the process, what we forget is that when you have spoken and you elect somebody, the process means that's the representative form of government. If you elected somebody with 35% versus someone with 51%, you could argue that person really doesn't represent me. But when 51%, that represents the majority of the people participate. I can accept that. And when you accept it, such as this young man, Mamdani in New York, every red-blooded New Yorker should say, I want him to succeed. I want to help him. Now, I want to speak truth to power. And if I think you're going off the scales, I can help you get back. If you don't, I'll go out and try to defeat you the next time. But I'm going to go in there with a positive attitude. They go in there with, I want them to fail. I want to stop them. I want to make them look bad. That's what people go in when their person doesn't win. That's what's screwing up the system. This changes that.
I appreciate you taking the tough question.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Go to the second mic.
Hi, I'm Robbie from Houston. I want to push back on this model a little bit. So with ranked choice voting, the idea is that you are ranking the person that represents you the best, like first, second, third, as you go. So if the first option loses and it goes to the second option, then you already lost. But in the model that you're presenting, if I want blue to win, then when I vote for purple versus red, I could be voting against my own interests. Does this, in the centrist bias, not undermine the idea of democracy?
Yeah.
Eric, do you want to take that as the expert?
So if you look at the consensus choice proposal, it's not up, well, you remember what it was. There is no incentive for voters to vote other than the way they truly feel. That is, and this is something we only glancingly talked about before, but plurality rule, standard voting, is immensely gameable. In the 2000 presidential election, for example, if all the Nader voters had voted for Gore, Gore would have won. That would have been gaming the system. You cannot game the Condorcet system, and that, I think, is another one of its big attractions.
Yeah, just to be clear, you can vote for your second choice second, and it won't hurt your first choice's chances of winning at all. But it will hurt your third choice's chances of winning, which is exactly the point, which is exactly what you want to do.
I know where he's coming from. Basically, the thing that's stacking the deck. So, they teach you, go in and vote for the other person because
Right.
it'll hurt my candidate.
Right, we've all been
That'll
trained
hurt
to
the person
think
who
about
gets
how
it.
to game elections because our elections today can be gamed, but this one can't.
Okay, we'll take the first mic, and this will have to be our last question.
Yeah, we've talked about kind of the positives of centrist candidates, but going back to the New York thing, I think a lot of people, a lot of Americans are hurt and are struggling with affordability and stuff. And so I think people were looking for that out-of-the-box candidate, and I think Mamdani was that. And a lot of conservative circles are saying, oh, like New York has fallen, Mamdani's the future of the Democratic Party. Well, why shouldn't we at least give Mamdani a chance in office
Correct.
to succeed?
Mamdani
before
was
labeling him as a
the
failure?
consensus choice candidate in New York. We know that because we saw the rankings that came out of the mayor's primary. So yes, he was a radical candidate, but he was also the consensus choice candidate.
Here's what I would say to that. That's the socialism way of thinking is up there, they're saying, and he confesses to be
A Democratic socialist.
Democrat socialist.
Yes.
And I say it's a grand idea, except when you run out of other people's money. Socialism doesn't work when you run out of the money, and that's other people's money they're spending. So how do you make the system work? That means have a fair tax system, have a healthcare system that incentivizes people to stay well, things that we could do that we're not doing. And you're thinking, well, we'll have to go to this extreme here. But what happens is, in my eyes of socialism, I'll give you a perfect example. Bernie Sanders and I had this. He says, Joe, I want free education. And I says, boy, that's wonderful. My son would love you. He's 40 years old. He'd still be in college if it was free. So we have a good laugh about that. And I said, Bernie, here's the difference between you and me. I want people with trade skills, and I want to use my community colleges to help them. I want them to take out a Stafford loan, guaranteed government loan, when they start school. If they finish and get the degree in the skill sets that we need and we've identified, it's forgiven. If they quit the first year, that loan's still theirs. Make them earn it. You give them up front, there's no value. That's the difference between us and socialism. You have to earn it.
Okay, thank you.
Well, These are the kinds of debates that we hope our political system will support. And I hope that you all had the opportunity today to hear this idea and to engage this idea, to hear about the new nonprofit that's being launched, to talk about trust in the electoral system. For those who didn't get a chance to ask a question, we'll have panelists who will be here in case you want to engage them. But please come on up, and please join me in thanking the members of the panel.